All right, so if you don't want to be recorded, now is the time to stay muted and and invisible. Okay, so welcome everybody to to our meeting. It's November 3rd, and we are going to have two speakers, but first we can do some introductions. I'm going to share my screen so we can see the agenda. Okay. Okay. All right, so can everybody see the agenda right now?
Yeah.
Okay, very fine. All right, so I'd like to review the agenda first. We'll do introductions of board members and then introductions of any residents who may be visiting us and other visitors. I will introduce Jonathan Cruz and Bill Cunningham. And if anyone is here from Black Futures Farm or Master Gardeners or Leach Botanical Gardens, we'll ask them to introduce themselves. Then we have two presentations. One is on the harms of wood smoke, and the next is going to be on zoning and transportation recommendations or areas of study right now in the Lower Southeast Rising Area Plan. If we may have some announcements there, I'll give some land use announcements. And then we'll turn to board business, minutes, treasurer's reports, update on Southeast Uplift. I would like to hear about music in the park because we never got a chance to talk about that over the summer because we missed some meetings. And then I'd like to talk about meeting with Russell Wozniak of the Brentwood Darlington Community Center. And then as time permits, you know, I'd very much like to hear from Mo and Casey. Vivian will be joining us later, and Derek is absent and Laura Lee is absent. So we're not going to be hearing from them tonight. So to come back, I would like to us to introduce ourselves, your name, your position if you are an officer, your general residence location and length of time living in Brentwood Darlington, and your interests or concerns with regard to the neighborhood. And if you like to do pronouns, please do. And if you feel reticent about that, then you don't have to. But let me call first on Pam. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Pam Hodge, and I am your newly elected treasurer as of last meeting. So please be kind. I live at the very southern boundary of Brentwood Darlington, Harney Drive, and 58th. And I think I've lived now a total of 27 years in Brentwood Darlington. I was born and grew up here and then went away for many decades, came back 10 years ago to care for an elderly parent. And I've been on the board for about 5 years. In terms of particular interests, I would say my first priority is preparing for climate change and making Brentwood Darlington more resilient. And I think TGM study that Bill will be speaking to and this concept of a 20-minute neighborhood fits nicely with that. So that's my number one priority. And I'm so glad to have Bill here today to talk about that.
Okay, thank you very much, Pam. Gail, would you like to go next?
Climate change. Yes, I know, very serious. Oh, my name is Gail. I've been here since '92. Holy cow. Climate change. We need something.
Yeah.
It's the only one with pizza.
Yeah.
Okay, very fine. So yeah, we are going to be taking up climate change in the year ahead. It's really, really critical, absolutely critical. And all right, Kim DeLeo, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Kim DeLeo. I've been a resident of Brentwood Darlington for 7 years, also an Oregon resident for 7 years. We're on Duke and roughly 63rd. I've been a board member for about a year. And I need to confess that I hand wrote Mo's name in for the vice chair.
Oh, you're the guy, you're the one.
I got a really good vibe when I saw Mo. I get vibes from people, and I thought it might be fun because I thought you and Mo lived close together anyway. I apologize, Mo, if that caught you off guard, but it was me. Okay, that's it.
Oh, well, thank you. Because we just couldn't figure it out. And Mo would like to, wait a while before she takes on a position like that. And so she decided that she would wait, but she appreciated the implied, the implication that she was competent enough to do it. I think I'm speaking for her, but I think she'll agree. But she said, well, she'll wait on this. Okay, so who else from we have me. My name's Stephanie Frederick. I'm the chair. I live in the general area of Flavel and 52nd. I'm in the southeast quadrant. I've lived here for 5.5 years. And I'm very interested in having the neighborhood association be everything it possibly can be for our neighborhood. And I want it to be regarded as an element of the city government. And so I'm hoping that we can build back up the functionality and reputation of the neighborhood centers and neighborhood associations. So that's one of my interests. And second, I'm very interested in climate change, and I'm very interested in reviving the Brentwood Darlington Community Center. And in part of that revival will be to create a resilience center where people can get warm in the winter and cool in the summer and charge their devices. And ideally, we'll put solar on the roof and have batteries that will store energy so that if the electrical power fails around us, that building is still going strong. So that is my one of my big goals also. All right, very fine. And now we have somebody who joined us now. This is Erin Poplak. Hi, Erin. Would you like to give your name and general residence location? And I assume you live in Brentwood, Darlington. Tell us about yourself.
Oh, all right. Hi, folks. I'm just a new neighbor. I just moved into the neighborhood. I'm over around 77th and Cooper, and wanted to see what the neighborhood association is all about. I'm a little late because I signed up for the invites, and it shows it as I think 7 to 9 on like the calendar. So I was glad I checked the website.
Well, yeah, sorry, we haven't pulled everything together yet, but we will. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, new to the neighborhood, and just excited to learn more about my neighbors and the community. I lived in Portland for many years. I've been over in the Sunnyside neighborhood the last 7 years. Grew up in the Multnomah area, and excited to be part of a new community and learn what's important to folks in the neighborhood. So thanks for having me.
Marvelous. Would you mind putting your name and email address in the chat, and so we can follow up with you and talk to you about what our plans are and what we're going to be doing over the next year?
Great. Absolutely. We'll do.
That would be outstanding. So it looks as though we do not have anyone here from the regular cast of suspects, Black Futures Farm, Master Gardeners, or Leach Botanical Garden, and perhaps they'll join us later. We do have both of our speakers here. Jonathan Cruz from Multnomah County, who's going to be speaking to us about the health hazards of wood smoke. And then and we have Bill Cunningham, who is working on the Lower Southeast Rising Area Plan. He's with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Okay, Pam, you raised your hand, yes? Okay.
Did everyone introduce themselves? I don't think Mo did.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mo. Thank you.
All right. Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for for solving that mystery for us of how my name got put up for the vice chair. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the vibe part. I really do appreciate that. It's important. And we'll see in the future. For me, I have been in Portland for 7 years and in the Brentwood Darlington area for 4. And I bought on purpose knowing I was moving into Felony Flats. I figured I could handle it. Just real quick, since I haven't met some of you in person, my background is I'm a federal government retiree and military, and I worked in federal law enforcement, and I'm a licensed private investigator today. And so what I have met with Stephanie recently here, and what hopefully I can add in that realm of trying to keep or trying to either get our neighborhood to a safer place or make folks aware of things that are happening. And Stephanie will probably bring this up later, but what I'll do is some people don't read on what's next door. I do. I'm not on social media, but I do like to follow what is happening and what kind of crime trends and things are going on. And I will be attending the neighborhood net regarding the earthquake stuff. So I'll report back. That is stuff I feel comfortable with, being kind of prepared for things. And I look forward to the community center in the future being a place for people to go, or all of us helping each other out if and when things happen. But again, thank you so much for putting my name up to take more of a bigger responsibility at this point. I'll continue to help out in any way that I can to make our neighborhood safer and better.
Well, thank you very much, Mo. And I'm sorry that I missed you when I was calling on people to introduce themselves. I don't know how to show all of the faces in my of everyone who's here. So I'm going to have to learn that as well with Zoom. Okay, so all right, so that concludes our introductions, and I think that we could go ahead and get started with our presentations. Jonathan Cruz is first in line to speak with us. And would you like to begin, Jonathan? And do you need me to make you co-host, or do you need to share screen or anything?
Yeah, could you please make me the co-host? I'll introduce myself while I'm setting up my screen. My name is Jonathan Cruz. I'm a program specialist in the Multnomah County Health Department. And I work in our Healthy Homes and Communities team, which is in our environmental health department. Oh, thank you. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes. Mhm. Okay, wait a minute. There can only be one co-host. Is that right? Hold on just a minute. I've screwed up here.
Oh, I think once I leave, you can pass it on to the next person.
Well,
You would have to make Bill the co-host as well.
can we all be co-hosts? Can he be a co-host at the same time as you?
You can try it and see if it works.
Okay, fine. I'm sorry, with the list of names was up there, and so I thought I would do co-hosting all at once. So go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you. Let's see. And so what I'll be talking about today is about our wood smoke curtailment ordinance. And I'll be talking about how, not only what the rules are, but also how it impacts your community in Brentwood, Darlington. And so the rules that I'll be talking about today comes from the Board of Commissioners resolutions declaring racism as a public health crisis. And in that resolution, they resolved that residents deserve clean air all the time, everywhere. And so on that note, I want to talk about how wood smoke causes harm on our body at an individual level, but more importantly at a population level, and how the problem of wood smoke harms our most vulnerable. Before we start, I always like to do an activity and have like a short discussion, just to understand where people are at. And so I turned on this survey. If you could either take a photo of this QR code or enter in this website, you can take a short poll. It has 4 questions. And I want to understand the Neighborhoods Association's perception of burning. So Bill, you can take this too. It's just everyone present. And knowing what people think about the issue will help me adapt my presentation and prepare for any questions that you might have.
Okay,
This will
so
take-
Jonathan, I'm sorry, but will you tell us again how to reach the survey?
Sure, you can enter in your browser that link. It's pollev.com/Jonathan Cruz 082. Or you can use your smartphone to take a photo of this QR code, which will take you to the survey as well.
Okay,
And this will take about 2 minutes.
okay, the QR code disappeared. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me put it back. There we go.
Okay.
Oops. Okay. If you don't want to take the survey, that's fine too. We'll
Oh,
just,
okay, yeah, no, I'm fine, it's fine, okay.
I'll put the link in the chat as well.
Thank you, okay, start survey.
Oh, Vivian is in the waiting room. Hi, Vivian. My name is John. I work at the health department. I am just starting off with a quick survey of people. And you can access the survey with this link or using your smartphone to take a photo.
Okay.
Okay, I'm seeing that 2 people have completed the survey and there's about 3 more. I'll give about until like 6:52, and then we can kind of go over the results. Is anyone having issues accessing the survey?
No, I just submitted mine, so. Okay, you say you have more than 2, all right.
I'll give about another minute to complete the survey. Cool. Okay, so of the 9 people here, 6 people took the survey. So let's look at some of the results. So the first question was, how would you rate the overall air quality in your neighborhood compared to prior years? And about 50% of you said that it has been worse over time. That's really interesting for me, as oftentimes I enter into these spaces where people have a negative bias of the problem. Air pollution has gotten worse. And I'm here to say, as an air quality expert, that air pollution has actually gotten better over time in the Portland area. And so if we're looking at from the 1970s, when we had lead in our gasoline, the air quality has improved a lot since then. But it's interesting that people have this perception that air quality is either about the same or worse. And I think that's really common.
But don't you think that, we've had more wildfires now and more smoky days, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's important to note too. And I'll talk more about that in my presentation.
Okay, I beg your pardon.
No, it's okay. And this is the point of the surveys, right? It's to ask more questions. So in the last month, how often have you thought of air pollution? For most of us in this meeting, we've thought about it often. And so it's always a thought on our mind. But interestingly, only 50% of you said that you have thought about the health effects of air pollution. So while you think about the problem, only 50% worry about the effects on our body. Most of you here do not burn wood, which is interesting. So, maybe the information I have to share might spark different action for you. And when you think of a fire in your home, most of us think of it as cozy, right? Some of us think of it as being outdoors or related to food. And some people have said that, it is a danger and a hazard. And I'll talk more about some of these concepts in my presentation as well. It's not just doom and gloom from the health department, but also there are some hopes in the story of air pollution. So let's get through these. And the reason that I wanted to start off with this survey is because in 2020, Portland State University did a similar survey that said that only 1 out of 3 people worry about the health effects of air pollution in the Portland area. And so while most people, and I think those kind of results mirrored this survey too, that while most people think of the problem, not many, but think about the health problem as often. And so it's interesting to me because it shows that our perception of the problem changes our ability to address it and to protect ourselves. My role as a public health educator is to interpret data. And what that means is look at the kind of story that is being told. And so as I am talking today, I would also like you to have any questions that you have and just write them down so that we can talk about them later. The first question that I want to address, though, is a really common one is, well, a fire can't be very harmful, right? Like we've been burning wood for thousands of years, so it can't be that bad. Well, let's talk about what's in wood smoke. So studies have shown that wood smoke is made up of various chemicals and pollutants. And the one that is of most importance is called particulate matter, or what I'll refer to as PM. PM is a particle that's smaller than the diameter of your hair, and is often referred to as their based on their size. And so the ones that are most common in wildfire smoke and in wood smoke is called PM 2.5. And as you can see in this image, it's like so tiny. And what makes PM 2.5 so dangerous is that it can enter our bodies through our lungs and enter into our blood and travel throughout our body. So PM 2.5 is an air toxic that is linked to several short-term symptoms. So, short-term exposure to wood smoke can cause a sore throat or a chest tightness, but long-term exposure can lead to health problems with cancer and premature death. One thing that also I wanted to mention that's not on there is exposure over time can affect your mental health as well.
Really?
Let's watch a quick video that we made to demonstrate the problem. So this is a video of my supervisor, Brendan Haggerty, who is using a particulate matter monitor to demonstrate how backyard fires affect his neighborhood. If you can't hear the sound, please let me know.
I can't hear the sound.
I can't either. I
You
apologize.
can't? Shoot.
I think when you do the share screen, do you have to do share with audio as well?
I didn't do that. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I will send the
Maybe
video
that's
later. But
Well, do you want to
I can
stop?
summarize.
Do you want to stop screen sharing and then come back on and see if there, we can find the audio.
Oh, wait, I can do that right now.
Yeah. I did that once in a presentation. And
Thanks for your patience.
I didn't figure it out so easily either. I struggled for a while.
Thanks for your patience. Let me try one more time. I just
Yeah.
clicked share audio.
There we go.
What I'm
Very-
trying to do here is replicate what I think is fairly common for a backyard fire. When we lit the fire, almost immediately the air monitor started beeping, and it eventually maxed out our air monitor. It was reaching levels that, if they continued through the day, would have been similar to what we experienced during the wildfire smoke events of September 2020. Wood smoke, believe it or not, is one of the biggest contributors to air pollution in our region and to health impacts from that air pollution. The pollution that we're worried about from wood smoke is fine particle pollution. So it results in health impacts that are wide-ranging, including cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and even adverse birth outcomes for pregnant folks. What we have in Multnomah County is about 1 in 10 adults reports asthma, which means chances are there's someone on your block who could be really affected by just one backyard fire. Protecting air quality now means protecting health now, making sure our families and our neighbors aren't overly burdened going into a season where we might have severe wildfire smoke impacts.
So Brendan made a couple of claims that were pretty broad about how air quality impacts our health. And so in my presentation, I'll be going over some of this data and the story that it creates, not creates, the story that it tells us, right, about the problem. And so when we often think of people who burn wood, these are people who are have lower incomes, right? So they need to burn wood in order to stay warm. And so we looked at information of that was available of households that use alternative forms of heat. And so this is a map from Metro and census data that shows by neighborhood, people who've reported to use other forms of fuel to heat their homes. So the Brentwood Darlington neighborhood is in black at the bottom. And if we look at, it's hard to see with this little bar. I'm sorry, I can't really see. Oh yeah, with the in the Brentwood Darlington neighborhood, about 8% of people have reported to use other forms of heating their home. And this map is a map that shows consumer data of people who burn or who purchase wood. And so in the Brentwood Darlington neighborhood, it looks like on average, there's a high use of people who buy wood. And this kind of makes sense, right? If people have the means to burn it, they have to buy wood. And so it's important to take this information in context. And so when we look at consumer data and overlap them with demographic data related to income, does it true then, right, that people who burn wood are using it for their sole source of heat? And what we're seeing is that that's not necessarily true. So this is a map that took those other two maps and put them together. And so the darker red colors are places in Multnomah County that have reported to have higher usage of bulk fuel. And the left map shows neighborhoods that have a higher income. So anyone making over $92,000 a year. And what we're seeing is that the neighborhoods that have higher incomes are actually buying more fuel. And this is really an important piece of the puzzle of the problem of air pollution, is that we're seeing that people who have the means burn wood, and it's most likely for recreation. So let's talk about that in context and related to our health. This is a graph that demonstrates the average Multnomah County residents' cancer risk from air pollutants. And when we think of air pollution, we often think of cars as having the greatest impact on our health. And while this is true, I'd like to point out that wood smoke is right behind it. Wood smoke exposure is even more significant than exposure to wildfire smoke in relation to cancer risk. And some of the reasons might be, is that, if you have a neighbor who is burning wood and you're constantly exposed to their wood smoke, your risk would clearly be higher. And I also want to know that this shows the average risk for cancer by exposure. And so if we look at exposure in a regional or demographic context, we see further disparities. So for example, if you live near a freeway, then your risk for cancer related to wood smoke would be higher because you are exposed to other air pollutants over time. And that kind of, pans out, right? So this is a map from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality that shows the results of concentration in an average resident's exposure to wood smoke. And so what this map is showing is that wood smoke affects East County and Southeast Portland, and that's likely due to weather patterns of winds that push air out to the east from the north and northwest. And in these areas, these are people who are environmental justice communities who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or have lower incomes. And so the areas affected in red and dark red are affected by the public health crisis of both air pollution and racism. And so if we were to take that average map, right, and put it out in context based on geography, what we're seeing is that neighborhoods who are burning, so, for example, like the inner Northeast area, they have a lower cancer risk despite participating in behaviors that increase risk for everyone else. And, there are many different reasons for that. One we talked about, or one that I talked about, was the wind patterns pushing pollution out east and into southeast. But also these neighborhoods have the means and access to things that can protect their health, like healthcare, air filters, and ecosystem services, which is like a public health way to say having a tree canopy that provides filtration. And so while they're causing the most harm, they are not feeling the effects of their wood fires, even though they are the people that produce it. And so what I'm trying to demonstrate is that while wood is cheap, the costs on our health are much higher over time. I have about 4 minutes left, so I'm gonna just kind of quickly go through this one. This is a map about life expectancy at birth, which is one of the health outcomes related to wood smoke that I talked about. And in the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood, on average, there's a lower life expectancy compared to the rest of the county. And that kind of correlates with the disparities that I had talked about and this neighborhood's exposure to wood smoke and other sources of air pollution. So I know that was a lot of really intense information in a short amount of time. But I just want to pause to see if there are any questions so far about anything that I've talked about.
Well, I have a question. I mean, what can we do? Do we charge the rich more for their wood? What?
Yeah, so, I can talk about what Multnomah County has done. And then, we can explore other options too of how neighborhood participation will make a really big difference in this work. So in earlier this year, the Board of County Commissioners passed a resolution. Their first one set targets for our program and aligned our county's ambient benchmarks to the World Health Organization, which has a stricter standard than the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. They also made our wood burning ordinance year round. And what that means is that we post burning restrictions year round. So when air pollution is forecasted to, potentially be a problem, we post burning advisories to let people know, like, hey, today might not be a good day to burn wood if it's a yellow day. And we have a red day, which is a restriction on wood burning on days where air pollution is unhealthy for sensitive groups. And so what we're saying is that, it's unacceptable to pollute the environment when our most vulnerable are impacted. Year round. We also removed an exemption that we had in our previous ordinance regarding EPA certified stoves. So a study from an independent agency in the Northeast of United States found that EPA certified wood stoves could not be verified to, sorry, I'm a little blanking a little bit. These stoves could not be verified to not release the amount of toxins that it said that it would. And so previously these devices had, filters on them or some kind of mechanic device that ensured less emissions, but the study showed that those results could not be verified. And so I think what's really important for neighborhood associations is to know that we are here to support you. Part of my role in doing education is also doing outreach. And so if I receive a complaint about a neighbor burning wood, I take a very trauma-informed approach and try to educate this neighbor about how their behavior harms other neighbors. We have a wood smoke complaint hotline, which you can find on our website. We also accept complaints through our email and our web form on our website. And our goal is harm reduction, right? Like, let's try to talk with people and reduce their harm so that it has a positive impact on everyone else. So I'm kind of right at time, but is it okay if I answer some questions, Stephanie?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Vivian, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, you were just talking about what my question was about. If someone were to get called in during a restriction, like what are the consequences of burning during a restriction?
Yeah, so on red days, we restrict burning wood unless you have an exemption. So there are qualified exemptions for people who do need to burn as their sole source of heat. And then also cooking is exempt. And then in emergency situations, like we wouldn't want people to be without heat. And so, we would kind of, if it's a first violation from a neighbor, we would issue a citation, but as a warning. And if there is a second citation or a complaint on this neighbor on a red day, we follow up and try to problem solve with the neighbor. Like maybe they didn't get our mailers last time, so they might not understand how the program works. Or maybe they do need to have a qualified exemption and just need to apply for one. I've had examples where, neighbors report other neighbors for burning on red days. And, I find out after talking to this neighbor that they were cooking and they have evidence that they were cooking. And so my role as a health educator in harm reduction is to prevent further citations. So our program, policies and procedures are defined in that way so that I can follow up with people and avoid citations.
Okay.
Yeah, when you
Thank
just
you.
to clarify,
I'm
when you
sorry.
say cooking, do you mean like on a grill or they're cooking over an open fire?
Both. Yeah. So sometimes I get complaints and people don't know where their source of smoke is. And so it's only most relevant on red days because that's like our enforcement capabilities is when the air is most polluted. We go and investigate. And so I just want to be honest too, like red days are very uncommon. They're probably a lot more common in the summertime when the air is really hazy and there's ozone and wildfire smoke. But in the winter, we on average have about like 6 or 7 red days a season.
Okay,
Um,
Jonathan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Kim DeLeo has a question. Kim, you want to go?
Hi there. Yes, when I first moved to town, I rented a house and all they had was a pellet stove. It was pretty terrible. And I was paying attention at the time. I thought there were some initiatives or that there was going to be legislation that at least rentals had to get rid of wood burning stoves as a source of heat. Is that a thing or is that in the works?
the only one that I know of is that no new construction can have wood burning stoves, I think. I'm not super clear on that one, but I can try to find more information about that in terms of like building codes.
Okay, so I just make a comment that one thing that neighborhood associations can do is to try to connect residents with city and county programs that, for example, insulate homes or install heat pumps and so on, so that people don't have to rely on wood burning to get their heating in their house.
Yeah, if your neighborhood is interested in further advocacy for cleaner air, the Office of Sustainability at Multnomah County is open to listening to your concerns. We have different advocates and organizations that want stronger protections for air because it affects our health. So I can also connect you to the Office of Sustainability if you're interested. I think someone raised their hand. Was it Gail?
Oh, you answered my question about the smoker for food, like a Traeger style.
Yeah. While cooking is exempt, we do want people to understand the risk. So if you do check the status, which we update daily, we ask people to try to change their behavior when they know that the air quality is poor. Our air quality app on our phones don't tell us the whole story because we take into account weather forecasts over the next 24 hours, which can affect air quality.
Okay, so people can reach you via the contact information that you've left with me in our email exchanges, right? So I can publish that to the neighborhood. Is that fine or what?
Yeah, you can also publish the wood smoke complaint hotline information too, and I'll send you that information, Stephanie, for.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. We should probably wrap that up now because we do have another speaker, but thank you. Do send me that information and then we will be informing the neighborhood about the information you've given us. I was talking today with Moham about ways to do that. And so we'll get the message out there. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Seth.
much.
Have a good day or good night.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, very good. Well, that was sobering, very interesting. And all right, so we have now our next speaker, Bill Cunningham from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And Bill and I think Brian Poole is here too, are going to talk to us about zoning changes and transportation changes in our neighborhood. So Bill, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. As Stephanie indicated, I'm Bill Cunningham, working on the Lower Southeast Rising Plan. And I'm a co-project manager for the effort, really from the planning side. And Brian Poole, who's also here, is leading the transportation work. And I also have Cassie Ballou is here. She's going to just listen in on the conversation and capture any discussion, make sure we're really taking note of what's said and what's shared. Basically, we wanted to provide you with an update as to where the plan is currently. And has this group received an update in the past?
Oh, go ahead, Pam. Go ahead.
Well, I have been the link between the TGM Advisory Committee and Brentwood Darlington, but we've had a number of canceled meetings during the summer, and we've never had extensive time to do a presentation. So, and we have new board members,
Right.
so take it away, Bill.
Great. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and let's see. Hopefully that will go smoothly. Just a second. All right. Do people see a slide?
Yes.
Well, welcome to our Lower Southeast Rising update, and really glad to be able to share where we are. We've been talking to a lot of people in the community over the last few months, and definitely want to share some of the things we've been hearing. If some of you are not aware of this plan, the overall intent of the plan or goal is to develop strategies to increase livability and housing stability in the area, as well as looking at ways how to connect people to employment opportunities, and especially in terms of active transportation, and making it easier for people to reach schools and local services and amenities, as well as recreation. And where we are in the project timeline, we've done our existing conditions work. We've started to we had looked at alternative approaches to addressing issues in the area, and that was happening last winter going into spring, and spring going into summer. We had a pretty intensive public engagement effort, and we'll say a little bit about that. And now that we've heard from a goodly number of people in the community, we've moved into really prioritization in terms of what kinds of improvements can do the most good in this area, and what kinds of implementation approaches could help make it happen. So that's where we are right now. We're beginning to look at implementation. And just wanted a little bit of background. This slide is actually from when we were working on our comprehensive plan for Portland. And one of the goals in the comprehensive plan was to create a city of complete communities. So communities where people can access services locally and not have to drive so much, and be able to get there safely. And this is a heat map that was showing basically places that had pretty good access, the complete sidewalks, and they had neighborhood business districts pretty close by. And the blue purple areas are showing areas that lack concentrations of local commercial services, and where the connecting infrastructure is not in place. So you're probably aware that your neighborhood does not have a very complete sidewalk system, and the connections aren't always there.
Yeah.
So the goal is to really move into a situation where it is easier to get around locally and to access services locally. So this kind of highlights just where we are. This is not one of the best well-served areas in terms of the inner neighborhoods going from the river out to about I-205. So got our work cut out for us. So perhaps not surprisingly, based on that and what you all know, some of the project goals include things like increasing commercial opportunities and neighborhood serving businesses, so you have more places to go locally. And also increasing housing affordability and options and choices in the area, so that a broad range of people can afford to live in the neighborhood. And also, of course, if we're going to have commercial opportunities in neighborhood businesses and places to go to, you already actually have a fairly decent park system, making it easier to get there through active and green transportation access. While we would like to work towards improving services and amenities in the area, we're also looking at ways we can limit any displacement that could happen. We want to make sure that the people who could maybe most benefit from not having to spend a bunch of money to drive around to get places could actually afford to stay in the area as it improves. So anti-displacement is one of the components of the effort. And just to say a little bit about the online open house and the survey that happened this spring to summer, and actually I'll leave it open for Brian, because he was much more engaged with this. I should note that Marty Stockton had led the planning side of the project for months, but she had an offer she could not refuse with the Parks Bureau. So she's moved on to that. And I've taken Marty's place, or am attempting to fill her shoes. But at any rate, Brian, would you want to share some of the what had happened during the spring and summer?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good to see a lot of familiar faces tonight. And yeah, just sort of as Bill mentioned, and we'll get into a little bit more about the sort of survey results that we got as it relates to both the land use and transportation. But appreciate everyone that took the survey. We know it was a long survey. There's a lot of questions. Again, we're asking about land use issues and transportation. A lot of sort of big some changes that we're proposing, and so I really appreciate everyone's sort of patience and just being able to digest that information. But got a lot of good feedback, and then we also worked with doing a bunch of different activities on the ground. Sort of, it was always a bit up in the air, sort of with lingering COVID, what was sort of acceptable and what we could do. But we did some community walks on 52nd and 72nd. I think we did 3 bike rides over the summer, presented to different groups and tabled at farmers markets, those types of things. And then we also, I don't think we have many slides about it tonight. Can talk more about it if folks are interested, but also worked with Latina Network to do some targeted engagement with parents of children at schools in the area, just to get their feedback sort of more focused on sort of non-English speakers, understanding issues and concerns. And then we also shared this survey and had them take the survey as well, just to make sure that we sort of were capturing more voices in the area. We got a lot of good feedback and interesting results, both sort of holistically, but also have everyone's specific comments that were left did not go unread, and we're still trying to sort of incorporate those into our plan. So thanks, and I'll turn it back over to you, Bill.
Sure, and it's worth mentioning with this group especially that when people identified what neighborhood they lived in, the Brentwood Darlington neighborhood had the largest share of respondents. So it's great to have had that level of engagement coming from residents in your neighborhood. We wanted to keep our presentation pretty succinct because we wanted to leave room for questions, but I just wanted to highlight some of the highest, or the highest level priorities identified from the survey. And on the left, it's showing the overall land use priorities, and the orange is showing basically the percentage of, or the numbers of respondents that ranked that topic as a #1 priority. And the one that received the most #1 priorities for land use was adding more commercial opportunities in the area. And secondarily, it was adding more affordable housing. And then just wanted to, I'll pass it on to Brian for the overall transportation priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I think just sort of similarly, you can see pedestrian improvements and street improvement. Well, pedestrian improvements was by far sort of the first or second top choice for transportation improvements, and then it dropped quite a bit after that, and then street improvements and bike or scooter improvements were sort of that next tier, and transit and lighting and bus stops further on down. So you can see that there.
And we're gonna, in the interest of time, launch right into just sharing some of the outcomes and basically where we're going from here. But for we had a series of community development scenarios looking at options for how the area could grow over time. And the study area, by the way, extended from the boundary of the city up towards Foster and Holgate, and then from Cesar Chavez to 92nd, but with a primary focus on the Brentwood Darlington neighborhood area. And I'm going to go through each one of these scenarios, which people did chime in on in terms of what they saw as most positively impactful for the area. Scenario 1 was basically keeping things mostly as things are now, no land use changes. And this would basically keep the setup as it is right now, where the primary community hubs or business districts are on Woodstock and Foster and the Lents Town Center. This is actually the least popular option in people's survey responses. Scenario 2 was about enhancing the intersections. Is it major intersections such as 52nd and Duke and 72nd. And part of the idea was maybe at least strengthening the small commercial clusters that are at those intersections. So maybe providing some additional commercial zoning. I mean, maybe some additional multifamily options in those key intersections. That got probably the second lowest number of interested parties in terms of seeing it as a priority. And then scenario 3, it took the enhancing the intersections idea, but then it also looked at providing more housing opportunities on the major corridors, particularly 52nd and 72nd. So allowing more housing options such as multifamily in that area. And just as a contextual issue, the majority of the zoning here in the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood is single-family zoning, but there's some interest in making sure we have a broad range of options, at least on the more prominent corridors. And then scenario 4, which we called centers and corridors, was the scenario with the greatest amount of change. It proposes the idea of a new neighborhood center over around 72nd and Faville that could be a hub for community with commercial services and more housing opportunities, as well as providing more housing options on the 52nd and 72nd corridors, as well as the whole idea of the enhanced intersections. And one idea that's gone along with this was officially designating in our comprehensive plan those corridors as corridors which change some of the allowances. In multifamily zones and corridors, you're allowed to have small businesses in conjunction with housing. So if you have a home-based business, rather than the 8 customer limit, you would have more flexibility on those corridors. So basically, responding to the community input we heard, we selected as the preferred community development scenario the centers and corridors concept. And as I said, it basically combines the elements of the other scenarios into one. And next steps are really looking at whether or not some zone changes would be necessary to implement those concepts. And among the areas we're taking the closest look at is that 72nd and Faville potential neighborhood center. And some of the initial ideas are extending some of the commercial zoning, at least in a low-rise manner, going south from the grocery outlet intersection. So developing a little bit of a main street there along 72nd. And a big question mark for that area is the eastern end of that potential neighborhood center, which basically meets up with 82nd. And in some initial discussions, people are interested in the idea of maybe moving away from the light industrial employment zoning we have on 82nd near Faville and opening it up perhaps to more commercial or even mixed use development. So that's something we're looking at. Potentially.
Bill, can I interject?
Sure.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but could these designations, medium mixed use, small mixed use, commercial residential, could you say what that means? What does a medium mixed use look like?
Oh, what the majority of what we're looking at is the small mixed use, which is a 2 to 3 story scale. And it's what you already have zoning at 52nd and Faville. For example, just no more than 2 to 3 stories, and medium mixed use is more like what you have on Woodstock, which allows up to 4 stories.
But I don't know what is mixed use.
Oh, it's a zone that allows a commercial plus residential. So a common thing you'll see is there might be ground floor commercial and maybe apartments or what have you up above. So
Okay.
it allows both. And yeah, and at least some of the initial thinking on some of the corridors is that the majority of any multi-dwelling zoning we might apply is basically the small scale multifamily, which is only about 2 to 3 story scale, so not a whole lot different than the zoning in the surrounding area, but allows more units. So the concepts we're really in the early stages of investigating are the possibilities of applying more multi-dwelling zoning on 72nd between Flavelle and extending up to Woodstock. And then 52nd, right now it does have some singles family zoning, although it's townhouse single family zoning along with some portions of 52nd. And the basic pattern is allowing some more expansion of businesses or commercial or mixed use zoning at the major intersections, and then some multi-dwelling in between those nodes. It's all very conceptual at this point. There's no formal proposal, but the general idea is how do we make that concept, the centers and corridors concept, a reality, and how can zoning help implement that?
So on this map, then that the purple dotted, the purple broken line, I'm looking at 52nd. Conceivably, you might extend the corridor all the way down to Harney Street. Harney Drive, Harney Street.
That was part of the concept, but I think where we're really looking at things is ending more in, is it Flavelle Drive?
Okay.
So not going down the hill, basically, keeping things, expanding the housing options where you're closer to the services that are anticipated.
Okay, and so there would be similarly on 72nd, you wouldn't extend the corridor all the way down to the Springwater corridor, then probably, right?
Right. I think as we're looking at right now, we wouldn't be going south of, I think, is it Crystal Springs?
Okay, all right. Mhm.
So not
I-
going
I-
quite
I-
as far south.
Yeah, okay.
But part of the idea there would be change if the Flavelle and 72nd area were to be a neighborhood center. It tends to work better for local businesses if you have options for more people to live close by within walking distance. So the concept could involve expanding some of the multifamily zoning adjacent to the corridor in that center.
Okay,
And,
just a moment. Kim DeLeo has a question. Please go ahead, Kim.
yes.
Hi, can you speak to what's going to be done for traffic calming measures, specifically on Duke, 52nd to 72nd and Flavelle?
We'll talk about transportation a little bit later, but
Oh,
first we're going
okay.
to talk about zoning. But
Gotcha.
yes,
Okay.
yes, we
Yeah.
can talk about that. And I have
Yeah.
something to tell you about it too. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Bill.
And it is a good thing to bring up, because the way we're approaching this plan is thinking both in terms of the arrangements of land uses, as well as how do you get around to be able to access those uses safely. But again, it's all very conceptual. I don't know if Stephanie, if you want to say anything else about some further Brentwood Darlington discussion on zoning.
Well, no, I have some questions, but
Sure.
I guess one of the things I wanted to know, and please, the rest of you, do raise questions in a specific zone, like say it's a CM1, a commercial mixed use zone. What is the smallest structure that can be built in such a zone? Is that a single family dwelling?
You can, you can do pretty small structures. In some of the mixed use zones, there's a minimum density. So typically it's not intended to kind of build new single family houses in the commercial zones. Typically you're allowed to do maybe more townhouse type development in those zones. But if you are, one thing that's different about this area is there are already residential uses there. So if you have a house there and we zone it to allow commercial uses, you can keep your house and you could add to your house or expand your house. There isn't limitations on that. But if you're doing new development, those commercial zones are really intended to be something that's at least townhouse type density, at least for the housing component.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to know that if there's a, a bottom limit as well as a top limit, and because I don't know that much about zoning. And then I wanted to also know, and I don't know if this is the point at which to ask it, but what will drive commercial development? If we move from CM1 to CM2, what are the possibilities that we will see more development? Because a lot of properties along 52nd are already CM1, but nothing's happening with them, right? The Moose Lodge stays the Moose Lodge, and Mary's stays Mary's, and it's almost as though developers are not interested in doing anything.
There, businesses typically want some visibility. So, if you could get more transit service there, and at least 72nd especially has a fair amount of visibility in terms of car traffic. They often want an anchor, and at least 72nd and Faville, you do have the grocery outlet. But it's never a guarantee. Businesses, they want to be seen. So it's still somewhat lower profile than Woodstock, but Brian will be sharing some concepts for how you might be able to at least get more transit access there. And we also want to create a situation where it's a more walkable and bikeable place, so you can access, at least have a customer base that can access it locally. Let's see, there are a couple more people with hands up.
Yes, Vivian, would you like to place a question?
Yeah, my question kind of piggybacks on yours, Stephanie, but it's very specific about the Duke and 52nd intersection, where the Apostolic Church is on the southeast side, and I think it's marked for potential zone change for apartments. Can you explain that?
Sure.
Change.
The zoning at the Apostolic Church already is a multifamily. It's the lowest scale, 2 to 3 story scale. We call it RM1. And one concept was large sites. If something ever were to happen, that could be an appropriate place to allow a somewhat bigger scale, so 3 to 4 story. But it would be taking what already has multifamily zoning but allowing some additional scale. But that's something we'd want to talk to the church about. And of course, we want to hear what your thoughts are about that too. Some of the changes, for example, are that at Faville and 52nd, over by the Moose Lodge, is that that general area around the intersection, maybe going from the low rise CM1 2 to 3 story scale to maybe allowing up to a 4 story scale right by that intersection. But we definitely want to hear from you, because one thing I should be really clear about: there is no mandate from the city that we have to increase the zoning in these areas. So it's basically more about what can bolster or help make happen what we've heard from the community in terms of creating a few more commercial node opportunities or neighborhood center, or just expanding the housing options. But there's no mandate where things have to happen. So we definitely want to hear what the neighborhood thinks.
I see that Pam, you have your hand raised. And did you have another question, Vivian?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
So just to piggyback on both Stephanie's question and Vivian's questions, the flip side to not attracting development is actually attracting development in the medium or longer term. And one of the concerns that I'd raised at the last advisory committee meeting is, how are we going to protect iconic institutions within Brentwood Darlington, such as the Moose Lodge or Mary's with affordable housing above her cafe, or Three Sisters on the 72nd and Flavel Street, because what I'm envisioning is when developers do become interested, because now due to upzoning, the property has higher value, that these institutions, maybe even though there's no mandate from the city, just economically, they're given an offer that they can't refuse. And therefore, the neighborhood loses some institutions that are valued and viewed as, quintessentially Brentwood, Darlington, and then we just become another cookie cutter neighborhood. So I know you're working on a displacement plan for housing, but will there be in that anti-displacement plan also some consideration of how to nurture existing businesses so that they do not disappear in the future as development occurs?
Right, that there are definitely multiple parts to answering that. In terms of displacement, one thing that it's good to look at is whether or not these longtime institutions or businesses own their property, because if they're just leasing the space, of course, they're more vulnerable to the change. I think in the case. Yep. So that's something we're looking at more in terms of the homeowner, or the property ownership. Like the Moose Lodge is owned by the Moose Lodge.
Yes.
And same thing with the church that's Kitty Corner is owned by the church versus a commercial broker. But that's something we need to look at. And if there are places that we really want to keep it the way it is, a way to prevent the change, of course, is to keep to tamp down and allowed scale. So maybe you keep the lowest scale commercial zoning in those areas. So we'd want to be hearing thoughts like that, like where are the places you don't want to expand those options. The plan does have we're identifying strategies to limit residential and commercial displacement. So that's something you definitely will want to stay tuned about as the project moves forward. But I don't really have time to get into the detail there. And I definitely want to give a chance for Brian to share where we are with some of the transportation components.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you very much, Bill. Okay. So do you want to go on to transportation now?
Oops.
Okay.
I see there's a hand up, so it's fine. Take that.
Yeah, we could take another question.
Gail has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Will the trailer park be protected on Flavel and 72nd?
Oh, that's
well, the manufactured dwelling parks in that area, they have a special zone that only allows manufactured dwelling parks. So that happened, I think, 3 years ago or so. There was concern about redevelopment of what is fairly low cost housing. So that zoning would change because the intent is we definitely want to keep some of those low cost housing options. And one thing.
And what does the special protection offer? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Oh, the zone where those manufactured dwelling parks are only allow manufactured dwelling parks. So you can't replace it with apartments or anything else. So that limits the likelihood that anything's going to change there, since what they've got is what you can get. The zoning doesn't allow anything but mobile homes, basically.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
And we're also looking at where are the existing low cost apartments, and we want to make sure we're not adding on too much development allowance that could result in their being redeveloped. So that's something we're looking at too, because we definitely don't want to be priming the pump too much for displacing folks. But yeah, it's definitely not something we have solved yet. So I really appreciate that people are identifying these things, because we want to make sure we continue paying attention to those issues. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian for the transportation component. And Stephanie, I think we're almost out of time. Is that right?
Well, but it would be, yeah, go ahead and start. And I'm sure it's okay if we add another 5 minutes or so. Go ahead.
Okay,
thanks.
Yeah, and I'll try to go quick, and then can drill in if there's any sort of questions folks have. So just doing a real quick scan of what we heard in the survey, as Bill sort of mentioned. So we asked a question about what the most important major corridors were we should focus on, and it was great that they sort of overlapped with the land use changes we're thinking about. So 72nd, 52nd, and Woodstock were by far the sort of top busy major corridors that we were asked to focus on. And then the next slide, we also sort of asked about what the priorities were on those streets, and heard again about sort of adding pedestrian crossings, filling in some of those gaps. There's a long gaps, I'm sure you all know, on like streets like Woodstock, where they're safe for safe crossings. Also improving safety at intersections, and then speeding and separated bike lanes, sort of moving down the line there. And then on local streets, it was sort of split more evenly, but again, adding sidewalks and then slowing car speeds and traffic calming. I saw the comment about sidewalks in the chat, and definitely, you know, we want to increase sidewalks. Unfortunately, they're very expensive to build sidewalks, and also take a lot of time usually for us to design. So we also are trying to balance that sort of, how do we make short-term improvements, places where we can calm traffic or divert traffic on these local streets, and then also prioritize where sidewalks should be built. And I'll get a little bit more into that on the next few slides. So on looking at transportation prioritization, I'll just go really quick on sort of the transit recommendations we're looking at, and then focus on some of the corridors that we're going to be focusing on more in this next phase of the planning process. You can go to the next slide. So this is what we shared in our open house, online open house, and it's a little hard to see, but really what we were trying to sort of push or advance is the idea of having continuous service on Woodstock, where there's not currently transit service between 52nd and 72nd, and then having continuous service on 72nd, as well as having a sort of more direct service along Flavel to the MAX station. And we proposed this. TriMet was more or less open to the idea, and they ended up actually proposing most of this in their new, if anyone's seen their Forward Together concept that they've released, but it's a pretty drastic change to transit service throughout the city, but really focusing on sort of improving equity and service for those high ridership areas. And a lot of what was recommended did align with this proposal, but there's sort of two alternative routes that we're still working with TriMet to look at further. And so if you go to the next slide, I'll sort of show what that looks like. So this is what they showed in the Forward Together plan. So it's sort of has that service on Woodstock as this sort of new frequent service, line 4 service. But you can see that there's still a line 10 that goes along Steel. It does no longer goes on Herald. It would drop down on 52nd. So there's duplicate service on 52nd, then cut over on Duke. So fairly close to Woodstock, and then back down on 72nd, over then to the MAX station. And what we had looked at, if you go to the next slide, was this is sort of just aligning with that land use scenario you just saw. So this is what would happen if that service stayed as proposed by TriMet. You can see that service on Duke Street. There, it does sort of serve more directly Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood, but there's somewhat of a gap between sort of where it serves that new neighborhood sort of center expansion along 72nd, and also doesn't provide Brentwood-Darlington access directly to Mount Scott Community Center. And so we had asked our consultant to look at a different alternative. And in that next slide, you can see where service would stay, sort of go along Steel and then drop down and go on Herald, and then go over to 72nd and down 72nd. So it provides service sort of more along that neighborhood center. It also directly provides access to Mount Scott Community Center, but what it loses, so that trade-off is that service to Duke Street and sort of more direct access to Brentwood Park.
So Brian, I have a question. If we kept the line 10 on Duke Street, and people said, no, we would like to be able to go all the way up 72nd to Mount Scott,
Mm-hmm.
it would it would require very little difficulty for TriMet to make that change because it doesn't interfere with any other lines. And so I'm just saying that is not fixed in stone, that Harold versus Duke, right?
It's not right now, but that's what they're looking at. And so once that they had proposed this concept and their concept that they came out with had Duke. They're now looking at proposing the alternative and analyzing internally what it would look like to have service on Harold and 72nd. Once those things do become sort of formalized, and that's months out, is my understanding. But they at some point they will need to start saying this is the route we're going to do, and then plan for that, right? So then they'd be removing stop. Like at some point they're going to have to remove stops, move stops, all that sort of infrastructure changes necessary to complement those changes. And so, for example, if they lost service on Harold, at some point they would be putting up signs saying, this is no longer serviced by TriMet. Similarly on Duke. So that's that sort of trade-off that we'll be seeing in the future.
So I have a question for you regarding the Duke, because there are quite a few people that depend on the bus line on Duke.
Mhm.
I mean, I live on Duke. I don't take public transit because, just to be quite honest, I feel like it's dangerous right now. But there are lots of people. There's a park right there. There's a school. I mean, every morning I see groups of children. I see groups of adults right there by across from the Dairy Queen. So I just don't really understand the rationale of trying to take away the bus line on Duke.
Mhm. Yeah, part of that is, to focus more on serving neighborhood centers and corridors. So Woodstock right now does not have service, even though it has a lot more density and a lot more sort of density occurring. But again, that's exactly the trade-off that we were talking about, is sort of losing that direct access to residents in Brentwood Darlington, and needing to better understand those trade-offs. And so what
Doesn't the bus line from Duke go through Woodstock, like the intersection of 52nd?
it goes to 52nd and Woodstock, and then goes to the west. So it doesn't serve that Woodstock section between 52nd and 72nd.
Well,
Could you go back to the previous slide that shows line 10 serving Duke? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what's proposed, what they came out with in their previous.
because then it would be
So
harder for people on Flavel to get to a bus stop. Are they keeping that line?
Mhm.
And we are reviving our community center, which is in at the bottom. It's right next to Lane Middle School. And I personally like having that Duke Street service to Lane and to our reopening community center.
Right. And I feel like Woodstock has gotten a lot of attention, and they're pretty, well established, where, areas Duke and further, towards Flavel have been, by and large, kind of ignored, honestly. And I don't know when it's appropriate to talk about those two streets with traffic calming, but it's out of hand. I mean, they're dangerous corridors for pedestrians, for elderly people, for anyone. And that's a big deal. Anyway, I'll get off my.
Okay, so I just to follow up with you though, they are considering, PBOT is considering putting speed bumps all along Duke Street, all the way from 52nd out to 82nd. And I know on Flavel Drive, that hasn't entirely solved the problem, but it has eliminated some of the heavy duty traffic, not all of it, and has reduced the speeding enough so we could put in a pedestrian crossing at Hazeltine Park. So some speed bumps in front of your house are in the works, but I just want you to know that.
No, I appreciate that, but what you see now, people just drive through the center of them at high rates of speed.
Yeah, no, I know it's not.
Right.
It's not the
And when
total.
you have, I liked your presentations previously too on the traffic calming measures, because then that even stopped people trying to go around people who are just turning, and then, near misses with pedestrians and other vehicles head on. So.
Yeah, thanks. Vivian, did you have a question? I didn't want to.
I think it got already discussed. It is about safety along Woodstock in particular. I understand the rationale to moving a bus line down Woodstock, but it's one of the widest main streets. And right now there's no traffic coming on it at all. So.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I'll get in hopefully real quickly just to some of the corridors we're looking at more specifically, but I did just want to flag, you can stay there, Bill, for a second, that having transit service on this section of Woodstock between 52nd and 72nd, it's a lot easier for us to get our engineers to justify crossings where we have transit service. And so getting this transit service continuously between 52nd and 72nd will make it a lot easier for us to add crossings in that section where there's huge gaps right now.
Okay, that's really good to know. Would they proceed? They wouldn't proceed the changes, the route changes though.
What we try to do is so if once TriMet sort of gets this adopted, we'll work closely with them on setting up where those stops would be so that the crossings align with the stops. But a lot of those stop locations are going to depend on what we end up adopting with this plan. So they're actually happening really complementary right now where, for example, if we have a neighborhood greenway on 60th, then we would obviously want the bus stop to be sort of in that location as well.
Would it be put on some capital improvement list for like 5 years out, or is it?
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. I'll get into a little bit of that in like a few slides. So yeah, if you just wanted to flag that, and then if you have a question, I can answer that. But yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that you're going to take away the bus stops at Duke, which would maybe help with crossings, to then put that on Woodstock, which would then create PBOT would focus then, because there's a bus line, focus more on safe crossings.
That's not necessarily. Let me maybe get to my present, because I think it'll make more sense if I can get through the slides rather than jumping all around. So Bill, do you mind going? So as I mentioned, and just to sort of to pigeonhole this, again, this is TriMet's, if you want to go back one slide, TriMet's doing this concept analysis. We're working with them at PBOT. But they also are looking at sort of the trade-offs there. So they're going to be looking at ridership, where people are going, where they're coming from. Again, how many people are, like at Duke, for example, are sort of coming down from Woodstock to get on the bus. Like they're analyzing all these different trade-offs, and then we'll be sharing some sort of new revised routes in the future. So again, if you have thoughts and feedback, make sure you're tracking that project and providing. The best way to provide feedback is directly to TriMet. In that process. Next slide. And Stephanie, maybe you want to have TriMet come and actually present on that in the future. It might be interesting. But
aren't you and TriMet both using the same contractor, Jarrett Walker?
We are, yeah. But TriMet, so we are, I would say in that sort of the route changes, we're more in an advisor role at PBOT. TriMet's obviously the ones that are gathering all the public feedback and ultimately bring that to their board for decision making. So we can advise, but we don't have final authority on those conversations.
I see, okay. All right, go ahead.
So yeah, I'll just go through these really quickly. So we, again, had all that public feedback, and we've settled on, and working with our advisory committee, settled on sort of these routes that we're proposing to dive in and prioritize further. It's 14 neighborhood greenways. We don't have funding to do all of this, and really we don't have much funding allocated at all right now. But we're trying to sort of set these priorities in order. So we have neighborhood greenways again, which are sort of, I'll explain what these are, but sort of more bike, local, low stress streets. Corridor improvements would be the busier sort of the streets that we've talked about, Duke and Woodstock, 52nd. And then local street improvements are either sort of the lower traffic streets or sort of areas where we need traffic calming. So if you go to the next slide. This is sort of the corridor improvements that I just mentioned. Again, we haven't gotten into specifics about where we put crossings, where not, but we've identified sort of these as the key corridors we want to focus on. And I think it's the ones that have been brought up: Flavel, Duke, 52nd, 72nd. And thinking about how these align with those land use changes that we're talking about as well. So if we have further development, that's something we're going to be analyzing in this next phase of the project, sort of doing traffic analysis for if we have that increased density, you know, how are those people moving? How are they getting there and what's that do to sort of the local street network? But you can see, I think this, it sounds like it sort of aligns with what the streets are that are the primary focus of this group. Next slide. The neighborhood greenways, like I mentioned, those are just sort of more or less streets that we've identified and tried to prioritize for bike travel or walking on lower stress streets. And so one of those is 60th. We've actually revised that. We had 57th or 62nd in a previous version, but had feedback about focusing more on making 60th a slower traffic, low stress street going right by the school. We're already sort of working with our neighborhood greenway coordinator to make that improvement. But you can see sort of a lot of different east-west, north-south routes that complement either funded or existing other bike routes. And then on the next slide, just that local street improvements. These are sort of more both areas of where we've sort of heard about traffic calming needed, and we didn't focus on one street because typically when we do some things like this, if we add speed bumps on one street, cars just might go over one street. And so wanting to think more holistically about how do we sort of manage speeds in these areas. And then other streets here are either paving needs or so just sort of other sort of deterioration of streets that we've heard and I analyzed as priorities. Sorry, I'm having to go really quickly, but yeah, you can get the next slide. Just wanted to sort of focus on, we have a lot of projects there. Can't focus, it's a little bit over our capacity to have all those projects out there and say these are all needs. So where we're at now is starting to tier those projects into tier 1 and tier 2. And then once we do that, we'll really be able, on those tier 1 projects especially, start to dig in. And like I mentioned, on Woodstock, say, this is where we think crossing should be, and this is the type of cross-section changes that need to happen. Maybe it's improving the bike lanes, it's widening sidewalks, those types of things. And then, and that's where we'll then be able to program those into funding sources. So Woodstock, for example, typically it's probably good, like was mentioned, it's a wider road. It's going to probably cost more to do crossing improvements. So that would be where we'd apply for a bigger grant that might take a little longer time. Smaller changes, like on Duke Street, where we might be able to do some sort of more programmatic, smaller, like most mentioned, speed humps or crosswalks, enhancing crosswalks. Those can typically be done more quickly. And then the tier 2 projects, and we're still sort of working with our advisory committee and internally on what those tiers would be. But those tier 2 projects, they're not bad projects. We just typically put those more into a later funding window to fund when opportunities arise. So that's where we're at there. I know that's a lot though, and so I apologize, it's getting late. So
I do have one question for you too, because the map that the other gentleman, Bill, showed of the areas in purple, how are those enhanced by TriMet and PBOT? And then also specifically, I guess, what could Brentwood Darlington neighborhood expect as improvements? I mean, we're not in the Woodstock neighborhood. I mean, we shop at the Safeway, but I haven't heard a lot about kind of like the enhancements for Brentwood Darlington, other than maybe some traffic calming stuff and taking a bus line out.
What areas in purple are you talking about?
It was the areas on Bill's map that were identified as, the purple kind of less serviced areas. Like Woodstock was yellow, very well serviced and whatnot. And then south of that, there's some areas that were supposed to be kind of the focus of improvements, and I didn't really see any. So I was just
I'm confused because I feel like most of the land use changes we're focusing on entirely in Brentwood Darlington, and then the transportation improvements are intended to complement and enhance those land use changes. So I guess I'm sort of confused. And Bill, maybe you want to go back to the land use scenario, if that's what we're looking at, but
I
I
was
think,
just curious if I missed something there.
So Kim, are you referring to the first heat map that Bill showed?
Yeah,
What's intended to help address that cool area is that strengthening Faville and 72nd as a neighborhood hub or neighborhood center would provide better local access to services in that general area of Brentwood, Darlington. We're not looking at creating a new business district, between 52nd and 72nd Faville, but focusing on improvements for creating a community hub at 72nd Faville would really serve that area. And the corridors, 72nd and Faville are both identified as priorities for improvements, as well as the idea of some of the traffic calming and local streets in that general area. So there's definitely not a gap in terms of the list of potential improvements in that area.
okay. Thank you for explaining that. I appreciate that.
Sure. And I know we've been overstaying our welcome. So just wanted to say just a little bit about next steps, especially for looking at the possible zoning approaches. As we're meeting with you, we're going to also talk to other neighborhood associations in the area, as well as the 82nd Avenue Business Association, as well as doing some targeted outreach to groups who haven't really been part of the conversation very much up to now. And we're also doing more staff analysis on issues and looking at just a range of components. I'll make this a more complete plan, and that's a bit more on the planning side. But really our outreach now in the fall going into the winter are really more targeted. We're anticipating that we'll have the discussion draft of the plan ready in the spring, and that's when we would go out for broader community outreach and have things like open houses and online surveys again. So it's kind of been a quiet time in terms of public engagement this fall, winter, but it's going to heat up again in spring. I know we don't have a whole lot of time for other questions. I did want to let people know that we do have a project website where you could stay updated on what's happening. And I believe Stephanie maybe have given the links to some of the documents that are related to our presentation, like the public involvement summary and the preferred framework report, but that can all be found on the documents page of that website.
But if you just type in Lower Southeast Rising into the search bar, it'll take you right to it. You don't need to do the BPS planning and all that, just Lower Southeast Rising. Oh, well, thank you very much, Bill and Brian. There's an awful lot to communicate, and it's a lot to absorb too. And I'm very conflicted over this Duke Street and Harold Street bus line 10 problem. I know you want to give
Disappointing.
Mount Scott Arleta a bus line, but on the other hand, Duke is a much more major street than Harold, and it's the edge of our neighborhood. If you take Duke, if you take all bus service off Duke, then we only have one line, the 71, going through our neighborhood. Well, I guess then we have the 10 would come down 72nd, so there's that. But I just myself hate to take away a central bus line right in the middle of our neighborhood, but we'll see.
Especially when it services the community, hopefully the community center, school children, the park,
Right, and Black Futures Farm and
I mean, there are a lot of people that take that bus line. And I don't take the bus line. I've taken it a couple of times to a concert before COVID, and I hope in the future I'll take it again once things subside. But there are a lot of people every morning at those bus stops.
Well, okay, well, we'll see what happens. But in any case, Brian and Bill, thank you so much. And we really appreciate the effort you've gone to educate us. And we'll do our best to absorb what
appreciate your time, and let us know how we can support your discussion, because we know it can't be all tackled during the confines of the little bit of time we have during the meetings. And definitely encourage people to chime in at the Forward Together website, because there's definitely some trade-offs. Like I think the 71 going down 52nd would become frequent service transit.
Yes, that's
So,
marvelous.
that's once every 20 minutes or so
Every
through
50,
through the day,
15.
15 to 20 minutes. And Woodstock, of course, would go to frequent, which we don't have. So all sorts of trade-offs. Really encourage you to discuss and chime in. And so thanks again for all your time.
And Bill, just to note, Bill, just to note too that TriMet stopped taking comments on October 31st on this first phase. So that's where I would recommend sort of having direct engagement, and I can help Stephanie or Pam, if we want to bring somebody from TriMet to this meeting directly, or they're also going to be releasing revised maps, and then there'll be a comment period for those as well. So
okay.
future opportunities, just didn't want you to go to the website, look at it and say, there's no way for me to comment right now.
Right.
So.
Well, we did discuss the changes with all the board members, and I did provide testimony to the TriMet board
Okay, great.
in support of the proposed changes. So we'll have another whack at it then, you're saying. Okay. All right.
So
Pam?
before Bill goes, just to let people know that you've invited him back for a special land use meeting on the 10th to continue the conversation, correct?
Yes. Yes. All right, Bill, you're coming.
I'll be there, and I'll be ready to start to dive into even a deeper level of detail,
Yeah.
into the weeds a little bit.
Okay, very good. And I think what I'd like to do is collect some questions from residents and board members and so on to give to you before the meeting, and maybe you will be able to address some of those in your presentation. I know I have some more questions.
That'd be great. Sure.
So I'll do that. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much. We need to get on with our agenda now. Really appreciate it, Brian and Bill. And
Thank
so
you.
you want to stick around and hear the board business, or you're free to leave if you like that. Okay, so let me consult you all. It's 8:15. Suppose we rush through the vital board business that we have to take care of and not do the break. And then at the December meeting, we'll catch up with things we're not able to get to on the agenda. Is that all right with everybody? Okay. All right, so I won't, we don't have any announcements from Black Futures Farms and the others. They didn't come. And as far as the attached report on land use and other announcements, you've read that, we can review that next. Let's just go to board business. I did the minutes for the October meeting. That was where we held our elections and so on. And then we had a very detailed summary of what happened over the summer, who arrived, who left, and when. And so Laura Lee looked at it and suggested that I eliminate email addresses that were included in the attachments, and I did that. So the minutes are amended to exclude all email addresses. So I would like to move that these minutes be accepted or approved by the board. And now I've forgotten the exact Robert's Rules order of things. I move that that we accept the minutes of October 2022.
I'll
board
second.
meeting. Okay, and then, all right, so then I'll ask each of you in turn, first, is there any discussion about these minutes? You've all read them, right? You've looked through them. Okay. All right, well, then I will take a vote by person. Pam?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Mo? Are you an I or an A? Oh, okay. All right, Casey?
Aye.
Thank you, Kim,
Aye.
Vivian,
Aye.
and then I am an I. And then we, Laura Lee and Derek are not here, but we have a quorum. So
Mhm.
then the minutes then have been unanimously approved by the board members who are here. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so then we need to look at our treasurer's reports for August and September, which Pam has prepared. I'm going to share screen and put these up for us. Okay, all right, can everyone see the August treasurer's report? Yes, okay. All right, Pam, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, sure. Thanks, everyone. So I sent these in draft form out about a week ago. I did not receive any comments. So are there comments now from anyone on this, or should I just go through it line by line?
Well, yes, I'd like you to go through it line by line, but I'd like to say that I appreciate this new format. I think it's very informative about everything that we have on our financial picture. So thank you for amending it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you're welcome. So as you can see at the top, there's the checking account balance in July, same as reported by the prior treasurer. And I went back and I looked at a year's worth of treasurer's reports. And at one time, the template also included the savings account balance. So I've added that line. Grand total of $5, but still I wanted you to know that. And then there's a small dividend that's payable just on the checking account. And then I've just updated the checking account balance as of August 31st. And the savings account balance didn't change because there's no dividend on that. And then I inherited as treasurer the petty cash fund of $285, which is missing from prior treasurer's reports, and I've just included that for full transparency. So there's the new combined balance. And then expected expenses that haven't hit the books yet, $183 for bagels, and expected income. As you can see, there's some funds being continue to be held by Southeast Uplift, and Stephanie and I are talking to Southeast Uplift about that. And then the Sparrowhawk plant sale income, we've encountered some problems with PayPal. We think they're resolved. We should have access to the funds in a few days, and then we'll pay out our partners and ourselves, transferring the funds from PayPal to our Advantis checking account.
But
So,
did you want to go into the problems or later?
well, I'll just briefly mention that, we're learning more about PayPal. There was a $99 and change transaction fee, which is a little annoying. And then apparently they make us hold $300 minimum balance in PayPal. So I'm assuming we will absorb the $99 transaction fee because we, Brentwood Darlington, were the ones that invoiced, the prior treasurer invoiced through PayPal. So I don't think our partners should bear the brunt of that. That's my recommendation, but that really has nothing to do with the adoption of the August treasurer's report. I can talk about that next month if you'd like.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And then I just continued at the bottom, the prior treasurer's summary of COVID-19 neighborhood support. There's been no additional neighborhood support expenditures. That's just a running total. So that's it for August. Do we want to talk about September briefly?
Yes, thank you very much, Pam.
So the same new format here for September. There was a small dividend again on the checking account of 21 cents. No dividends are payable on the $5 in the savings account. There were no additions or withdrawals from petty cash. So there's the combined balance. And then I think the rest of this has not changed. So The only difference in the forecasted balance at the end of September is the small dividend from the Advantage checking account reported above. So, I mean, it's just pretty simple, and hopefully that makes sense to everyone.
Okay, very, very fine. Makes sense to me. Thank you. It's gorgeous. All right, so, okay, Kim DeLeo has raised
Just
her hand.
one quick question. Now that I saw the grocery outlet gift cards, do we still have those or do we need to re-up those?
I think we need to talk about whether we want to do them again this next year, and then if so, how do we hand them out? You know, in the past, Chelsea would hand them out at her pop-up sale in her yard, and so she would make sure that they went to people in need. So we might need to determine whether we give them to a food pantry or what. But we want to make sure that they get to the neediest people. So in addition to buying more, we need to figure out how to get them into the hands of people who really need them. Does that respond to your question? I'm not sure.
There are no
Yes,
gift
thank you.
cards to my knowledge that we are holding. I believe they've all been dispersed. So if anybody has knowledge to the contrary, please let me know.
Okay, and Casey, you had a question.
Yeah, just a note or a follow-up to that last, speaking to what people in need and getting the grocery outlet gift cards to people in need. Does anyone know of a woman who lives on Flavel across the street from yours? She has over the years developed a very large entry and clothing giveaway. I don't know what, a lot of
I've
people
seen
stop
her.
there all
I've
the
seen her.
time. That might be a person to reach out to. She probably knows a lot of the people that we're talking about.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. All right.
So
Okay, very
should I
good.
move that we adopt the August and September treasurer's reports?
Yes, all right. Do I hear a second?
A second.
Okay, second. Okay, second by, I think Casey got there just ahead of you, Gail, but thank you. And all right, so let me call the roll. Let me go from the bottom up here this time. Vivian? Do you vote in support of the treasurer's reports as presented?
Aye.
I thank you. Mo,
Aye.
Kim,
Aye.
Gail,
I,
Casey,
Aye.
okay, Pam,
Aye.
and I say aye as well. Have I missed anyone?
Aye.
Yeah, I think I've got everybody here. All right, so all right, the both reports are adopted unanimously by the board that is present. So thank you very much, Pam. I know a lot of work went into those, into revising them and then into researching things. And you just when we tell you about the PayPal thing, you're going to laugh at how much time we spent on just getting into the PayPal account, and then to find out that we were $99.01 less, from our fundraising than we had
That's
expected.
crazy. I did not know that PayPal charged that a fee,
Well, yeah, we didn't know, and we
charge
didn't.
me.
but I don't use PayPal because I used it once, like 6 years ago, and my my debit card information was stolen. So I
I
said,
use it,
never again.
I use it a lot and I've never
Yeah.
been charged.
It's weird.
Well, I will investigate further, but that's what it's showing online. So yeah, I'm outraged.
Especially for a nonprofit. They're not
Doesn't
supposed
it,
to charge us.
No, I know, and they also want to keep a $300 minimum balance
No,
there.
we're not a business.
Mhm.
Let them know we're not a business.
Well, yeah, Pam is doing that. We had to get Pam instituted as
Oh, man.
treasurer, as
Thanks.
owner of the account, just to be able to speak to
Mhm.
PayPal. So, and we succeeded in doing that, what, yesterday, day before?
They were holding our funds for unusual activity, yes.
Oh, right, yes.
Hmm.
Okay, very fine. Let's see, we're running out of time, and we have 2 items here. I still would like very much to hear, but let me tell them out of order, or calling them out of order. Gail, could you tell us about Music in the Park real fast and how that went?
It was hot. Everyone who was there. Next year, it's not going to be so hot. I'm going to put in a request. There was a lot of people who showed up, and the band was great, and there was dancing, and
Aw.
the ice cream kind of melted, but it was still delicious. But the other food truck couldn't come because of the heat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Really?
They couldn't bake in 100-degree weather.
Oh,
Do
for
you
heaven's
blame
sake.
them?
Yeah, I was really bummed to miss it, Gail. My daughter tested positive for COVID and we live in the same house.
Oh,
So I hadn't tested positive, but I didn't want to go to the park and
Yeah.
expose people.
But we all
I
sat
thought
in
that
the
wouldn't be good.
shady part of the park, so it was actually beautiful. It
Mhm.
was nice and cool. There
Mm.
was a breeze. So yeah, it was really nice.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad it was such a success. So and maybe bring that band back next summer. I don't know.
Or a movie. We'll probably have a choice, concert or movie.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for doing this year
Yes.
after year after year.
And we save some money.
Yes.
Don't
Thank you,
yeah.
Gail.
Thank you, Gail. Yes, we did.
I know you worked hard on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
So-
you.
Casey, your hand is still up. Do you want?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't know what
It's okay.
happened.
No. I'm trying to.
Oh, I
teach
have to
myself
lower
to
my
see
hand.
the
I didn't.
hands, Right.
I'm new to all this. This is
Okay, well,
Very
thank you
good.
very much, Gail. So Kim, could you tell us quickly about Southeast Uplift and quickly maybe tell us what's on their agenda? I don't know
Oh,
anything about
This,
them.
well, I know this will be really quick because my meeting is Thursday. This is
Oh.
one of the off months. And the last meeting was dealing with the, I don't know, 30 or 40 grievances that were filed by Alan Field.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, for
So-
heaven's sake. So
so they've responded to it. And we can talk offline. I can send you some information. But so hopefully we're moving past that because there's a lot of work to do.
yes, yeah, there is a lot of work, and I'm sorry to hear that they're still on that topic. That's because that's been going on for a long time now.
My whole time there. And wondering, Pam left me there. Just kidding.
I had a year of it,
Yeah.
so it's your
Oh, yeah, it's all good.
This is
It's all good. Anyway, so hopefully I'll have something good for the group next time. Oh, and I know that we are going to do a retreat. Board members are going to be doing a retreat one Sunday in November for 5 hours. So that'll be nice to actually get together in person and meet people because we have not had, I think they had an ice cream social. I was out of town, but so it'll be good to actually meet a bunch of people and spend, a couple of hours getting to know them. So.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. Then maybe you can launch away from this past problem with
Mhm.
is it Alan Field? Is that the right word?
Yes.
Name? Okay, yeah.
So,
Okay,
I'd like to, make some connections so that we can get in on, even the neighborhood cleanup. Certain neighborhoods, maybe coordinate efforts. So anyway, we'll hopefully be moving toward that kind of stuff.
yeah. Okay, very good.
Okay.
And as for cleanups, I've learned that we are designated as an equity focus area, which gives us a lot of access to big money from Metro. So in December or January, we'll start talking about our events for the coming year. And and try to coordinate with the neighborhoods around us and so on.
First Saturday in May.
Well, I don't know. I may not be psychologically up for a giant household cleanup, but maybe there's some, one of our ex-board members is willing to do an electronic recycling combined with bicycle maintenance workshop and at the community center. And then but we'll see, you know, I may regain strength over the Christmas holiday and may be able to talk about a household cleanup, but not tonight. This has been some month of hard work. So would it be all right with you if we stay just a few minutes longer to hear from our 3 other board members? Do you mind? Hello? Is it okay? All right.
Fine.
Okay, so I asked Mo to give us a quick report on what issues are trending on Nextdoor. What are people worried about? What are they talking about right now? And thank you, Kim, for your report on Southeast. Yeah.
So I'd like to say I'm not on social media, but I do check out Nextdoor just to see what's happening. And so some of the major things I'm just following is like safety and security in our area and what types of things are happening. And so in the future, I'll probably be able to talk about how to be safe with what's trending. But I'll just, for the sake of time, just say one quick thing that I saw as a thing on Nextdoor. It appears that it was a situation that 2 women were in a home, and an individual entered the home, and he had like a headlight set up and awakened the woman from her sleep. And then proceeded, him and a accomplice were able to steal both vehicles from the home. No one was hurt, but was able to steal like these vehicles. So this is the type of thing that could happen. I think I read that the person might have left her door open, but still this could happen whether you've done everything you can do. You know, whatever I'll bring to you of what's trending and how to be safe, kind of think about being safe. You know, I'll do the best to maybe advise of what you can do, but again, vehicles and stuff in your home are things. Your life is valuable. So, you know, what I would say is, you know, if you had to give up things to not be harmed, that's always will be the route that I would take.
Okay, so right now, so trending on Nextdoor is this is more violence, more intrusion, and so on.
Home invasion.
Yeah.
Home invasion. Okay, thank you very much, Mo. Yeah, and yeah, right. Better to give up the car keys than your life. Yeah. So, okay, so I'd like to call on Vivian next, and then Casey. I asked Vivian Vivian is a landscape designer. And I asked her to tell us what draws her interest in landscape design. What's most important to her? Go ahead, Vivian.
That's a very hard question to answer, Stephanie, but I think what drew me to the profession is the puzzle solving nature of it and the analysis. And it's everything from very specific, you know, site construction based. How do you build something? How, you know, if it's sloped, if it's not draining properly, if you have just weird a context to build around. Everything from that to a very high level planning project. And something like what Southeast Rising that was presented tonight would fall into that category. And everything kind of dominoes from one to the other end of the spectrum. And something that I'm particularly drawn to are street trees or trees in general. So on a very, you know, site specific scenario, it's looking at exactly where a tree is being planted and if it has enough root zone space. And there are all sorts of calculations for how that might be figured out. I've worked on a project, one of the first projects I worked on didn't actually have enough root zone for these large trees that they wanted to put in. And we had to come up with a way to connect different tree wells using cylinders. And there are all sorts of kind of higher cost root creating solutions on the market. But yeah, just thinking more creatively about what a tree needs and how we get trees to survive in a city. And then again, on the other end of the scale, like where do we put trees? And how do we, how do we encourage large shade canopies rather than the smaller, easier to maintain ornamental trees that most homeowners and property owners want to put in? So there's just endless number of questions and things to think about in the field because it is so broad. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I'm happy to more.
It's interesting because, during the heat wave last summer, they did a lot of research on kind of, the temperatures of the concrete in areas without trees. And I think Southeast was identified as one of the main areas where that was lacking tree canopy. So as you're talking, Vivian, I'm wondering how we could get together and plant trees in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I used to volunteer with Friends of Trees and lead tree plantings and then do the maintenance. And that maintenance portion is so important because we planted so many trees and so I'm running out of batteries. So many of them would not survive, and we were planting them around college campuses where people would go to parties and then decide to bash a young tree afterwards. So, or, it would succumb to heat during the summer heat waves if people weren't properly taking care of their trees. So we have to plant them and we have to take care of them, and then they will give us shade. It's the only infrastructure that we can invest in that will actually get better with time. And I'm going to probably say that over and over and over again, because trees are amazing.
Okay, well, that's something that we can certainly work on this next year, educating our residents to love trees and cherish them and not cut them down. And so we will do that. We will work on that. Thank you so much, Vivian. And we're so glad that you've joined our group. It's just wonderful. Casey, let's hear from you. What have you observed as you are diverting debris along the streets? And are you there? Casey.
Oh, he muted himself. I think you're on mute, Casey.
Yeah, we can't hear you. If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Oh, he ran out of
Ran
batteries.
out of batteries. Okay, we'll get him next time. We'll catch up with him next time. All right, then we'll draw this to a close now. Thank you for staying later. Let me just tell you one funny thing. I met with Russell Wozniak of the Brentwood Darlington Community Center. He's the facility supervisor. And I wanted to meet with him and try to start off on a very good relationship going forward, because we'll be using the community center again. And we had a very nice chat. And I came away with the sense that if we keep him informed about what we need and do it in writing and remind him, we'll be fine. There will be we shouldn't have any misunderstandings. And I learned from him, one of the things he contends with, and he's told me specifically, please, if you have balloons at an event, please take them with you, because when the balloons are left alone on the floor at night, they move around and they set off the alarms, and he has to drive all the way down from Richfield, Washington to shut off the alarm and pop the balloons. So just to remember, if we have balloons, we have to clear them out of the building so that we don't make him travel all that way. So I thought that was funny. Okay, well, thank you. We had a very long, very, very, full meeting, and I appreciate your hanging in there all the way.
Thanks again, both to you and Pam for getting us back on track. Greatly appreciated. And for everybody on the board, but we really appreciate all the work you've done.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kim. It's been very satisfying to try to pull things together and learn what's going on and in some cases, make improvements like with the reports and so on. So, yeah, no, it's been a challenging month, but it's been very rewarding. So because it's for the BDNA and for the neighborhood and we're glad to do it. All right, everyone, go and have a good rest of the evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I need to stop the recording. We'll post it. Okay.